Hi everyone, this is 1 year on. I'm Alison. Following on from episode 23, today's episode is about the planning that went into this travel overseas. I always plan out everything, always done it. I guess I'm a fail to plan to fail kind of person. That said, nothing is perfect and sometimes things go wrong. I'm going to tell you about the planning I did for this trip and what I had to do in advance. I started thinking about travelling and the window of opportunity I might have in the third month after I had the stroke. The reality had hit that I might never see my family again, and this was very confronting for me. I wanted to take my 2 kids with me to see their cousins and my extended family, and given time passes so quickly, they are now enormous teenagers compared with the little kids they were the previous time we'd been there. This time it would be more of an adult holiday than a kid holiday. And I knew I could include more adult or boring type activities, visiting castles and cultural places and things. Places that are simply not interesting to younger children. And often you see younger children taken around who are simply not worth it for them to go. The majesty of these places is simply lost on them. Anyway, so back to the planning. There were many things to consider: my children's ages, their educational stage, where each of them would be at that point, and school terms and holidays from school. So the rough travel dates were focused on the winter school holidays here in Australia and a few weeks around that. I knew my younger child could potentially be absent from school in the last 2 weeks of school term, as all the assessment work is complete, and maybe the first few days of the next term. And my elder child had finished school last December and was taking a gap year, so that provided a wider range of options for the time to travel. I was keeping an eye on the flight prices, as I simply didn't want to be in the UK during winter again, so I considered that summer would be a better time. There are more daylight hours. It's warmer in temperature, not necessarily better weather, but the increased daylight hours means you can be outside more, or at least up and about more. One of the airlines put a special up, and that piqued my interest. COVID times, it was simply not possible to fly for Australians, and in the immediate aftermath, I didn't want to be in the UK when COVID was still swirling around, with the impost on travellers making it a really unpleasant trip. Also, the Australian Passport Office was groaning under the weight of people applying for passports, and I wasn't going to be applying for a passport when I simply couldn't guarantee that my passport would arrive in time. And that did happen to a lot of people. Firstly, I knew I had to speak to my doctor as to whether there was anything that would prohibit me from flying. I wasn't going to fly against medical advice. My doctor was very supportive, and we discussed some provisos, which I will talk about in the next episode. With her support, I began the process of checking out flights and working out what could be done. I remember sitting and making the bookings, and all evening was sitting getting exactly what I wanted for each flight, 4 each way, to make it all possible. Once they were booked in, and that was a weight off my mind. My insurance was available through my credit card as long as we all travelled together, and the flights were booked using that credit card. I was then thinking about what I could do with the kids and where we would go. I had a large amount of places to consider. Reasonably, you could spend 3 months in Scotland and not get bored. You would be penniless, of course, but you would have been well entertained. So I made a large list and I worked around that. There were cultural things, tourist things, history, fun things. I wanted to take my kids to see things that had some meaning to me and visit people who had been involved in my life growing up. I was soon realising it would be a real challenge to fit everything in. I then took a break from it because I simply got too overwhelmed thinking about it all. I had several people from different angles starting to count down to when we would arrive, and I told them to not involve me in that countdown or else I would panic. Panicking's not good for me. And then after a break, I was able to come back to the planning and started to think about what realistically I could do. I knew I would be the only driver, so it would have to be smaller, shorter drives, and they would have to be spaced out. I looked at my work schedule of Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I planned the week around about that. It actually worked really well because they were the bigger days, and largely Tuesday and Thursday became the days to do things closer to home, so to speak. I'd wanted to go further afield, and I left them until later in our stay. In terms of actual booking of tickets, I checked out all the places and got all the costs and added it all up and decided not to book the tickets in advance because things happen and I didn't know how I would manage with the jet lag this time, so I wanted things to be flexible. Also, I knew with being away I wouldn't manage to record the podcasts the way I wanted to, so I planned to record 7 episodes in advance and load them up into YouTube. Those early episodes were recorded out of order actually, and it was funny loading them up out of order, but I got it done and felt good about managing that. The software I was recording it on became too laborious, so I managed to find a software package that was quicker to record, quicker to edit, quicker to export, and I was becoming a lot more competent preparing these episodes. That certainly helped me get 6 weeks of recordings done in advance. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share and subscribe. I will be back next time to talk about how I coped with the flights and the airports.